It's so much more exciting than I imagined.
Did you watch the whole game?
Of course.
I'm gonna be 100% honest. When The Queen's Gambit first came out on Netflix, I had no intention of watching it. I was really busy, had a million things going on, and barely had enough time to watch the things I'd already started. On top of that, I didn't know too much about it other than Anya Taylor-Joy was in it, and it was about a young chess prodigy who struggles with addiction. I wasn't the most interested by it and planned to just let it pass me by. But then reviews started coming out, and people were absolutely raving about this series, saying it was one of the best things they'd seen all year. And this is where I got more intrigued. So I decided I was going to watch the series, but in the weeks leading up to actually starting it, there was one question that kept popping up in my head. How are they going to make chess interesting? Okay, hang on, before all the chess fans dislike this video, allow me to explain myself. I think playing chess is fun. I haven't played in a long time, but when I did when I was younger, it was always a great time, even though I sucked and essentially knew nothing. It's sort of a social thing, you can do it with your friends, and you can feel super big brain when you win and utterly humiliated when you lose. Playing chess is a wild time. But watching people play chess is a different story. Chess games are long, they're usually quiet, and there are about a million rules, strategies, and sequences about which the average person knows nothing. I am said average person, and I'm sure most people who watched or would watch this series are as well. So while chess players and fanatics could probably watch this series and find it riveting, the series would theoretically be a lot less accessible to the average viewer. The chess matches, which take up a good portion of the entire series, would be a lot less accessible, very confusing at best and downright boring at worst. And nobody wants their art to be boring. But with the sheer amount of chess playing in this show, seriously, there's a lot, and the fact that the average viewer is probably not super into chess, you'd think the matches would be kind of a drag to watch. And oh ho ho, would you be wrong. The Queen's Gambit manages not only to make its chess scenes rather easy to follow, but also makes them insanely riveting, so much so that I was always anticipating the next one. It would have been very easy to slip into a formula for the chess matches, to shoot them similarly if not exactly the same each time, which makes it all the more impressive to me that the filmmakers not only kept each match new and interesting, but also had them service the important parts of story, the characters, plot, and conflict. In this video, I want to go over the 8 major chess sequences the main character Beth Harmon played, and break down how exactly the filmmakers made them interesting and plot-enhancing. I will be going through the entire series, so this is your official spoiler alert. I feel like most people have already seen this since I'm pretty late to the game, but if you're like me and you put it off for a while, I highly suggest you go check it out. It will not disappoint. Alright, that being said, let's take a look at how the Queen's Gambit made the ordinary extraordinary. Beth's story begins when her mother dies in a deliberate car accident and Beth survives. She's taken to the Methuen home for orphan girls, where she starts her new life. The very first thing I noticed about this entire opening is just how desaturated everything is. There's little to no color throughout the entire beginning of the show, and any color there is has this bluish, grayish tone, sort of like the hue that the skin of a dead person has. It makes sense though. Her life right now is defined by death. The death of a mother who struggled with mental health, and the death of a father who refused to take her in when the time came. This is set up as the status quo for Beth. She's living a dull, muted life, colored and defined by death. That is until Beth sees the chessboard for the first time. We can immediately sense the shift from this dull bluish gray to this soft, warm yellow. We finally get some sort of saturation, and it's a great contrast from everything we've been seeing before. Something I enjoy too is that there's actually a reason within the scene for this yellowness to be here. It's coming from this light overhead. So it lights the scene like any light normally does, but it also sets the tone and displays Beth's feelings towards chess and Mr. Shaibel. Not only that, but this specific kind of yellow light and this level of saturation is not seen anywhere else. Not when she's playing the high school chess club, not when she's playing chess on the ceiling, not even during any of the games she plays when she's older. It only appears when she plays with Mr. Shaibel, which, once again, goes back to the light coming from this fixture in the ceiling. This is a unique color. It's only in the basement, above this table where they play chess, so of course we would never see it anywhere else. Even when Beth comes back to the Methuen home years later after Mr. Shaibel has died, the moment she sits down at the table, she's bathed in that same light, bathed in the memories she had down here, at the love she felt for chess and Mr. Shaibel. This light is such a great way to visually convey their relationship. In a childhood that's mostly been drab and dark, in a life riddled with struggle, playing chess with Mr. Shaibel is a bright spot, and will always be one. So what about the actual chess playing? We start off with this slow push-in, and it feels like we're watching Beth think, seeing as she slowly discovers something she loves for the first time. This is nothing super special, and that's fine. It's the first real chess scene we've seen, and it's short. It's simple, tentative, dipping its toe into the water as a test before fully submerging itself. It's an introduction, and it's a damn effective one at that. From this point forward, we get serious. At the Kentucky State Championship, Beth mops the floor with her competition and makes it to the final game, played against the current champion, Harry Beltik. Right off the bat, this is so different from her games with Mr. Shaibel. Harry is sort of egotistical, he's smug, he doesn't see Beth as a real threat. He does things to try and piss her off or trip her up, like coming in late with a cup of coffee, yawning, seeming so disinterested in the whole thing. For the most part, he's very composed and knows exactly what he's doing, so much so that he doesn't even have to think very long before making his moves. He moves almost immediately after Beth does, and Beth always takes a ton more time when making her moves. She has to think more. She's more uncertain. This first pull out of the camera is opposite of the push-in with Mr. Shaibel. She's no longer with a friend, but with a foe. She's not playing for fun, she's playing to win. There is a tiny section where she seems to be keeping up with him, which you can even just hear from the rhythm of the pieces, the clock, and the buttons. This in and of itself is brilliant. We get quick over-the-shoulder shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot, matching the pace of the game, shooting Beth and Harry in a similar way, almost making her his equal, until she falters. Even though it seems like she's keeping up with Harry here, she's still half a second slower until she finally just stops. She can't do it anymore. So we come back out and shoot them symmetrically, one against the other. And look! He's even shown in the light here while Beth is in the darkness. He's the star of this show, and he knows it, and so does Beth. She feels she's being bested, and is getting overwhelmed because of it. For this first half of the game, we mostly get wides of the board, never a close, especially not on her pieces. Combine that with the constant over-the-shoulder shots, and we get the sense Beth isn't connected to this match. She's distant from it, like her head's not in the game. And yeah, I mean her head's not in the game. Everything up until this point seems to be working against her, and this is where we truly see that Beth hates not being in control. She makes one mistake, she's bound to make more, and other players pick up on this particularly damning trait of hers throughout the series. But this is our first instance of it. The more time she takes deciding her moves, the less time Harry takes. Every move she makes, he counters within a split second. These close-ups show her being stifled, backed into a corner. It's not looking too good for her. And then she takes the pill. Up until this point, the match has been completely silent. It's only after she takes the pill and sees the pieces on the ceiling like she did all those years ago at the Methuen home that the music comes in. She's got this. She comes back much more composed and ready to play, and Harry can sense that shift in her. She moves with precision, having a confidence to her moves that she lacked before. The tables have turned, a complete 180. Now she knows exactly what she's doing and doesn't even have to think before she moves, while Harry grows more and more uncertain, taking much longer times to deliberate. And this is the first close on the board on her pieces who we see. And from here on out, it's all close-ups, of the board, of Beth and Harry. And they're not over the shoulders either. They are head-on, between the characters, inside the scene, inside the game, not outside. Beth has finally showed up. She is finally playing to win. Eventually, Beth knows she's gonna win, but Harry insists on playing. He doesn't see what Beth does just yet. A few more moves, and he finally does. This comes back into play when Harry and Beth train together, and he can't see things as quickly as she can. The whole game is a brilliant battle of wits, of ego against ego, with a fantastic turning point and a satisfying conclusion. Beth's first major win. She's now the Kentucky State champion. This first real chess match was 6 minutes long and exhilarating the whole way through. Right off the bat, Beth's first game with Benny seems to be the exact opposite of her game with Harry. Whereas she went into her game with Harry underconfident, she goes into her game with Benny overconfident. We get her power music right from the beginning. There is no question in her mind of whether or not she can beat him. That's shown by the pieces moving in overtime on the board before she begins, similar to how they move on the ceiling after she's taken pills. She did take them the night before, so they must have worn off by now, but she carries that feeling of unstoppability into this match. We get this beautiful Dutch angle as she goes through all the moves in her head, like she has every option in the world, and all she has to do is choose which one she wants to use. Once again, she's playing against an enemy. It's shot 1 against 1, but her opponent is much more threatening than Harry was. For the first half of the game, Beth and Benny are keeping pace with each other. It's such a fascinating battle to watch. At around the halfway mark, Beth makes a move she believes will get the best of Benny. This is done as a close-up, once again showing off her confidence in her moves. Benny's move is also a close-up, which only feeds her confidence. But then the voiceover comes in, when she's telling her mom what happened afterwards. This is the first chess match that we get an actual plain English explanation of what's going on, which is set up from her other games in the same episode, so it's not super jarring. We don't get the narration for the first half of the game, but for the second half. Not having a voiceover in the first half shows her confidence. That's how it's been thus far. But now, we finally get a voiceover, and it marks the point where everything starts going wrong for her, the beginning of the end. And now, we finally see her talking to her mom after the match.
I went into that game with a perfect score.
And we immediately know something's wrong, because why would she say that if she didn't come out with a perfect score? We continue getting close-ups of Benny getting the better of Beth while she narrates. His moves are clear, with everything else blurred, which contrasts previous shots when everything on the board was clear for Beth. With this blurring, we see Beth losing her grasp on the game. It's starting to fall apart. And then we get one of my favorite shots from this entire series. This blur of the big signboard, and then that gorgeous 90-degree tilt as we come down to Beth. Her world is quite literally turning on its head. The more we hear, the more hopeless it is. We start spinning around Beth and Benny, which is the first time in a chess scene that we've had a fluid movement. Not just straight cuts, but an actual movement. It's no longer structured and predictable. There is no back and forth, no shot, reverse shot. The ball is entirely in Benny's court, so it makes sense that we're on his side of the table as we turn, watching Beth struggle. And then she flashes back to Mr. Shaibel.
You resign now.
This is not just a flashback for the sake of letting the audience know what she needs to do, but a callback to her very first loss. A loss that didn't exactly matter because she was just starting to play in the basement. But it mirrors this moment with Benny, her very first professional loss. Technically it's a draw and she still becomes the co-champion with him, but to her, it's a loss. And just like that, she basically becomes Harry, although he took it much better than she does now. The ego she waltzed into the game with has been squashed. She's finally been defeated. She finally realizes she's not invincible. They don't even show her face when she shakes his hand, but rather we cut to Benny, as if she's so ashamed by her loss she can't even look at us. This chess match is another step up from Harry's. It employs some of the same tricks, but adds new and interesting storytelling techniques like the narration when things start to go south. And this is a trend we'll see in future matches as well. It took me a moment to figure out how the filmmakers decided to use it / not use it, but I think I finally got it. Narration is used when Beth plays people who are superior to her in skill. She has to work harder, so it's almost like the narration is showing us her working harder, showing us what's happening in her head. It's an intriguing trick that I really enjoyed, and it definitely won't be the last time we see it. Overall, Beth's first game with Benny is a thrilling ride with a fantastic reversal and a harsh reality check to her, that she can indeed be defeated. Beth's game with Georgi feels the most like a battle than the other ones so far, probably because Beth is the most similar to her opponent. Both started playing at a young age, both were considered prodigies, and both want to prove themselves against the other. There's one camera movement I really liked. Right here. Moving between the board to Beth, to the board to Georgi, and back again. It's like we're there with them, watching the game, moving our heads back and forth from their faces to their pieces, trying to keep up with the battle. Their moves are fast, clean-cut, a rapid back and forth, much like the first half of Beth's game with Benny. But whereas in that game, Beth felt more in control and lax, in this game, Beth almost has a vendetta against Georgi, probably because they're mirror images. Hours go by and they adjourn. Clearly Georgi is really good, and it's throwing Beth off to have someone that young and similar to her be so good. This is where we really start to see Georgi as more than just an opponent when he brings up American drive-ins, but Beth is still in competitive mode. This is another one of her major personality traits. When she plays, she does so to win, and when she doesn't win, it's devastating to her. After working out all her strategies, she returns to the match and has a completely different demeanor. For the second half of the game, we don't even see the board once. Beth gets up, starts walking around, tapping her foot, essentially doing it all to throw him off, kind of how Harry did for her, but also because she knows exactly what she's doing. She's not underconfident, not overconfident, but just the right amount of confident, because she knows whatever he does, she has a plan. It's so interesting that we don't even have to see the board for this last part of the match. The story is not told by the pieces, but rather the players. This is our new and interesting piece, having her just mess around, and it makes sense to do it this way for this game. Since Georgi is the most similar opponent to Beth that she's played so far, it was such a smart decision to make her more personal by focusing on them rather than the board. It's only after she secures her victory that she softens and becomes nicer to Georgi, now that she no longer feels threatened or has a point to make. This game with Georgi continues to further Beth's character while making for a really fun dynamic where we get to see a different strategic side to her. It's almost like Beth is playing herself with how much they're alike. Vasily Borgov, the one chess player Beth is afraid of. She even says it herself. She wasn't afraid of Harry or Benny, and definitely not of Georgi. But Borgov is a different kind of player. He's Russian, and the Russians have always been the top chess players in the world. So, yeah, this game is nerve-wracking. With this first Borgov game, we get narration right off the bat, not from Beth this time, but from a Spanish commentator. She's outmatched, and the narration is a hint as to how this game will end. However, what I find to be the most interesting about this first game with Borgov is that the match itself almost isn't even the main focus. Rather, everything but the match is the focus. Amidst scenes of the game, we get cutaways to Beth's mother, who seems to be getting ready to come see her match, but eventually just stops. We see the twins sitting in the audience with a seat saved for her mother that never gets filled. We see the twins and Beth at the swimming pool, in which one of them, Matt or Mike, I literally don't know which is which, is talking about how whoever is playing white will always win. And Beth just so happens to be playing black. Everything, right down to someone taking their photo with flash, is distraction, and if you put that all together, you'll be able to realize right from the get-go that Beth will not win this match. Once again with the camera movement, we're starting with a symmetrical wide with a push-in, over the shoulders in the middle, and close-ups nearing the end. Not a single close of the board, which is another hint that this is not Beth's game. Like with the first part of Harry's match, we're distant, removed from the game by all of these other distractions. She gets more and more anxious with every second that goes by, going from her pieces to the signboard to her mother's empty seat. We push in closer on them as the game progresses, stifling her in a way similar to her game with Harry. She knows she's lost. Just like when she shook Benny's hand with her back to us, we don't even see her knock her king over, like she's too humiliated for us to see it. And here with Borgov, Beth experiences her first real loss. If the draw with Benny hurt like hell, this loss to Borgov is 1,000 times more painful. To add insult to injury, the worst match of her life so far leads right into her finding her mother dead, which in turn fuels her dependence on substances. This first match with Borgov and its devastating aftermath is a midpoint of the entire series, a turning point where everything starts to go downhill. Round 2 with Benny is possibly even more fun than round 1 was. We're in Ohio. A couple years have passed since their first match against one another, and Beth has only gotten better as a player. Benny is the first person Beth plays more than once, so of course the filmmakers can't simply do the same things they did before because A, that would be boring, and B, it wouldn't serve the story. But once again, the filmmakers went above and beyond with it. First of all, they don't play each other immediately, but rather have to play their way up through the tournament. Instead of taking a more grounded approach like they did before, they completely say, screw it, and we get this snappy montage with some super fun editing. It's a great way to show the passing of time and them both cleaning house with their opponents, and it portrays them as equals in skill. On top of that, the quick close-ups on their pieces and the focuses of just their eyes, the snazzy score, everything about how this montage is presented feels almost like we're watching a fun western showdown between two cowboys. And, I mean, when one half of the party looks like that, he's a grunge cowboy. How is no one else screaming about this? It's amazing. So after this day of chess playing, Beth turns down Benny's offer of hanging out with him and his friends in favor of studying for her match with him, but ends up going down to the cafeteria to get coffee where Benny and his friends just so happen to be hanging out. She gets roped into a match of speed chess against Benny, and man, this is so much fun. Gotta say, maybe one of the coolest chess scenes from the entire show. Everything's moving so fast, it's impossible to keep up with them, and that's the point. We have never seen chess played like this in the show yet, which makes it a refreshing, not to mention impressive scene, especially when you realize Anya Taylor-Joy and Thomas Brodie Sangster were actually playing. It's a great juxtaposition from every other chess scene, and their last chess match specifically, which was much slower, much more calculated. It also serves as a little refresher to Beth and Benny's chess-playing dynamic. Just like their last game, Beth still has a little too much confidence, believing she can beat Benny, and getting her ego deflated with each loss she suffers. It's like many little versions of their first game, just accelerated, reminding us what their only existing match was like. Speaking of the Beth-Benny dynamic, am I the only one getting sexual tension from this entire speed chess scene? I mean, they're both trying their hardest to beat each other. In fact, she's trying much harder than he is, and she gets more and more flustered with each loss. Everything from the quick movements of their pieces, to the looks they give each other when Beth knows she's lost, to the way he asks,
"Again?"
both overly nonchalant but also subtly flirtatious. It's all super telling of the way their relationship is headed. It's sort of reminiscent of how children tease each other on the playground when they have a crush. Benny is doing the teasing here. You can tell just from the glances he gives Beth between moves. He's the only one doing that. She's completely enthralled in the board, trying so hard to beat him at his own game, while this is just another day, any old game for him. He's messing with her, toying with her almost, in the way he knows will get her worked up the most. And she retaliates in the best way she knows, working harder, playing more ruthlessly. Because what do you do when you're being teased? You push back. It's a great way to develop their dynamic and push the plot forward. Eventually, Beth gets fed up with losing and goes back to her room, but the scene has served its purpose. Beth and Benny's dynamic has been developed, and we as an audience have been reminded that their skill level is super similar, which puts us on edge for their official game the following day. And all of that happens within the backdrop of this epic speed chess. The next day, Benny apologizes for teasing Beth and tells her she'll actually probably win against him in their match, regardless of the outcomes of the speed chess. She's a better player than the last time she played Benny, and he knows it. If anything, this next match is going to be even more impressive than their first, than maybe even their speed chess. And then the match finally rolls around.
Well, I never thought you'd let me trade queens.
You didn't think so either.
And that's it. That is all we get of their big match. A handshake, preparation, and Benny's first move. When I first watched that, I was shocked. I was so surprised that we didn't get an in-depth game between them, that we didn't get to watch Beth get her win. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. We've seen Beth versus Benny twice now, and we'll see it again in the future. So seeing it once more, it would have been one time too many. We've established the dynamic between them, we understand their characters, and we've seen Beth improving her skill over the years, so it's not unbelievable to think Beth could win this, especially when Benny admitted she had a better chance of winning himself. Showing us the full game wouldn't serve much of a purpose. It's not giving Beth her first loss like her first game with Benny, and it's not developing characters like the speed chess. It would only be Beth winning, and that in and of itself isn't exactly interesting because we've seen it before.
He forced an exchange of queens.
Oh.
Couldn't believe it.
Well, I never thought you'd let me trade queens.
You didn't think so either.
Anyway, after the game, Beth and Benny have a drink. They discuss her going to Paris and Moscow, and Benny offers to help Beth train up before the championship in Paris. She's not sure if she's even good enough to play in Paris, but Benny says she is, so Beth agrees to come to New York with him so she can practice, and also, oh, she wants to fuck! In New York, we get a second round of speed chess. Now, I know you're shouting in horror, what? 2 speed chess scenes so close together? That's illegal. And it might be, if they were just Beth and Benny playing. But this is the Queen's Gambit, and we continuously up the stakes in this household. This time, Beth plays a simultaneous against Benny and 2 other dudes, one of whom is a grandmaster. This is the complete opposite of Beth and Benny's speed chess in Ohio. This time, she's much more prepared, which means her practice with Benny has paid off. Not only is she kicking Benny's ass, but she's kicking the other 2 players' asses as well. This time, it's her turn to be almost toying with Benny, not asking again like he was, but saying it, demanding it. It's shot super fun too. Still intense like the first time, but not nearly as much. It's more fun, more reflective of her nature during this game. We get music, swaying movements, a flirtiness from Beth this time, and whereas we didn't see her say no to playing again in Ohio, we actually see Benny refuse to continue because he knows he's been beat. And apparently that turns him on because, okay, moving on. Anyway, the speed chess was amazing. Off to Paris we go. So Beth's second game against Borgov in Paris is a big yikes. She was staying sober while she was with Benny in New York. In fact, he made it very clear that her sobriety was important, not only for her chess abilities but also for her health. But now she's in Paris, and Benny and his prohibition apartment are not here with her. But Benny's enigmatic lady friend Cleo is. Against her better judgment, Beth meets her for 1 drink, but ends up getting wasted. And... it's really bad. She gets to the game late with a bad hangover. She's also presumably a bit high from the pills, but they're not working the same way they always have for her. Once again, this game isn't about chess. It's about her inability to chess. We barely see the board. The most we see is her shakily moving pieces, which drives home the fact that she can't be playing right now. We get new and interesting editing of this big signboard to show time passing, but for the most part, we're too close to her, right up in her space, suffocating her. Every sound is both muffled and heightened. Pouring the water, drinking the water, the rattling of her breath. It's uncomfortable to watch, which it should be. She's at her worst here. She's hit rock bottom. On top of that, this game is intercut with silent scenes from New York with Benny, like she's remembering what she was like when she was with him and sober, like she's regretting her actions the night before, longing to go back and change things so she could be at her best like she was with Benny in New York. She's trying to remember everything she practiced with him, but the flashback is silent. She can't remember anything. Later on, when she battles with whether or not to move her rook, it's like she knows if she does it, she'll be throwing the game. She agonizes over it, but also knows she can't win this. Eventually, she does move her rook and knows she's been beat. It takes all her strength to say the words,
I resign.
2 words she's never said before. Yes, she has resigned in the past, see Benny and Borgov 1, but we've never heard the words actually come out of her mouth before. So it's fitting that this is the first time we do. It's the worst game she's ever played, the match in which she really is the most resigned to her fate. All in all, from the moment she woke up fully clothed in the bathtub, we knew as an audience she wasn't going to win this. This is even further devastating because it starts her biggest spiral downwards yet. So far, she's 0 for 2 with Borgov, and this match further emphasizes Borgov's skill and shows us the extent to which her substance dependency can go. Finally, Moscow. Beth has gone through a lot to get here. Her mother's death, her life at the Methuen home, Alma's death, the beginnings and ends of relationships with Harry and Benny, matches upon matches upon matches, alcohol and drugs, an awful downward spiral, reuniting with Jolene, and her painful climb back to sobriety. Her entire life has led her here. She's in Moscow all by herself after treating Benny like crap for long enough for him to refuse to come with her. Even still, she cleans house against the other opponents, including the Russians, most of whom underestimate her. And all of this ends with her final game with Borgov. The first part of the game feels like we're members of the spectators, watching outside, listening to the radio, fighting to get any knowledge of what's happening in the game. We do see them playing, but we're relying mostly on the storytelling of the commentators. Once again, we haven't really seen a match from this outside perspective yet. It gives it this otherworldly feeling, amplifying just how big this game is. During the adjournment, we get to see a little more inside Beth's head, how she longs for the pills and the drink, but needs to force herself to stay away, how she feels like she needs them, but she knows she can't use them. It's here where we truly see how alone she's feeling. She's climbed to the top, but she's pushed away a lot of people she cares about and who care about her along the way. Juxtapose that with all the Russians working together to figure out games, and yeah, she's feeling pretty isolated. But now she's got some support back in the form of Towns, who has always been rooting for her. However, the big moment comes in the morning, when Benny, Harry, the twins, Hilton, and the Grandmaster, whose name I can't remember, call all the way from New York. They've been up for hours working out how to help her win. As soon as she answers the phone and hears Benny's voice, you can feel how grateful she is, how happy she is to have them all here for her, even after she's put them, Benny and Harry especially, through quite a tough time and essentially screwed them over. At the end of the day, they still love her, and she loves them. This moment of coming together to help her in her hour of need is exactly what she needs right now, what she's needed her whole life. Support. A family. And she has that with these guys, with Towns, with Jolene. And it means a heck of a lot more when you realize this moment serves as a callback to Benny's line earlier.
Best players in the world, the Soviets. And you know why they were the best players in the world? It's because they played together as a team.
Team Beth is here, and they're here to stay. So she returns to the game, newly energized. She plays with a poise she never has with Borgov before. There are no distractions, she's completely sober, and she has her friends on her side, who help to figure out a way to beat Borgov. Even the music is different for this section. Whereas the score was tense and dark during her first 2 games with Borgov, in this game it's calm and serene. Almost every shot is a close on the board, reinforcing that Beth is ready to win. Things are going well. Until Borgov makes an unexpected move. And suddenly, everything is messed up again. You can see it in her face, that moment where she freezes and realizes it's not going to be that easy. Her carefully laid out plan is over. Her friends have gotten her as far as they could, but now it's up to her. She has 2 options here. She could lose her chill and throw the game like she has the other times. Or she can believe in herself. And finally, she chooses the latter. The entire series, her entire life, she's been dependent on the pills to help her play. She even said so to Towns the night before. But finally, she pulls out her inner strength and realizes she doesn't need the pills. So she looks up, and there on the ceiling is a chessboard. Just like she did all those years ago in her bed at Methuen, just like she did for Harry Beltik and those nights alone in her house, she plays the game on the ceiling and comes back to the real game, ready. And it pays off. She wins. I love this shot because as far as I know, we've never seen this exact shot before. For the most part, the players have either been shot over the shoulder or from the side or somewhere in between, but never really like this lower angle straight on shot. And it evokes the sense that she's finally able to look Borgov in the eye and know she's won. They are equals. Nay, she has risen above him. She has won. And one of the sweetest things is that Borgov is honored to lose to her. He's genuinely happy for her. Her friends are genuinely happy for her. Beth is genuinely happy for her. And that's all that matters. After all is said and done, Beth walks down the streets of Russia dressed as a white queen chess piece, and is met with awe from these sweet old chess players in the park. When she sits down to play, we realize it's like she's back in the basement playing with Mr. Shaibel. She has that same serenity. She has finally come full circle. Overall, I was extremely impressed with the Queen's Gambit. It took a premise that might not have been the most interesting sounding on the surface and turned it into one of the most riveting bits of television I've seen all year. It's a talent to be able to make many versions of the same basic premise, a chess game, and not only make them all individual and unique, but plot enhancing and character developing. If there's one thing the Queen's Gambit has taught me, it's that anything can be extraordinary if you want it to be.